Zigzag and One, a place where we honestly discuss how to embrace the zigs and the zags in our crazy lives. Running away is not an option. Living in defeat is not an option. Instead, learning how to keep moving forward is what we'll do together, one nugget of wisdom at a time. Your host is Melanie Brown. She's navigated a few zigs and zags in her life with the determination to never give up. Expect great stories and lots of laughs. Are you ready? Let's do it.
Welcome to the Zigzag and One podcast. I'm your host, Melanie Brown. I am always interested in hearing about or reading an overcomer story, and have I got a good one for you today. BJ is a wife to Jay, a mother of 3, and a nana to 2 precious grandchildren. She's also the author of the book, Unwanted No More. A bit of a warning for today's episode. If you have young children, I urge you to consider having them leave the room or you listening at another time, because BJ candidly discusses her struggles with abuse, addiction, and abortion. So put in your earbuds and join my conversation with BJ to learn how she moved from feeling unwanted to knowing she is wanted. I am so excited to have my guest BJ Garrett with me today. Recently, she published a book called Unwanted No More. And I was aware of this book by my friend Athena Dean Holtz that I interviewed last season on the Zigzag and One podcast. And she could not say enough about BJ and her incredible story. So welcome, BJ.
Hi, Melanie. Thank you so much.
Well, I want to cover so much. Your book is power-packed with all of the zigzags that you have faced in your life. And so I just want to jump right in, if that's okay with you.
Let's just jump right in. Let's get started.
Okay. So I'm going to refer to your book a couple of times, and then we can kind of go from there. But one of the things that struck me right away was this passage. And so I'm just going to read it, and then I want you to unpack that for us, because this is kind of where the name of your book came from and tells a lot about your early beginnings. So it says, I am alone. When will mom be home? Unwanted. Why am I not wanted? I've been struggling most of my life to piece my memories together and make sense of the ugliness that crowded my mind whenever they came up. Maybe those gaps were for my own self-preservation, a defense mechanism designed to protect me from pain. But what I couldn't remember frightened me, because the cold, paralyzing blankness of those black holes still evoked all the emotions of being abandoned and unloved. In most of my memories, my mother was missing. That was a tearjerker moment for me when I read that passage, because you have the word unwanted and you have abandoned and unloved. And as a mother, those are hard words for me to read about another young person.
Yeah. As a mother myself now, it's hard to even imagine my own mom. Like, how was that possible? Like, it's so hard for me to comprehend and try to relate with my own mom in her circumstances in that season. But yeah, that was my struggle. And I don't want to necessarily give any spoiler alerts, but obviously, as you know, as you completed reading the book, that view and that changed. But most of my life, that is exactly how I felt. Very much alone, very much. My mom was just non-existent in most of my life. And when she was there, it was not the typical, play dress up, fix your hair, bake cookies kind of mom.
And so it goes even further, the next few pages, where it's not just your mom that you feel unloved and unwanted from. And I'm quoting from page 30. One day, he, being dad, came home drunk and spat these words at me. I don't want you. I wish you'd never been born. And your response to that was, that day I died inside.
Yeah. For me, it was kind of ironic. My dad, I had always just had these fantasies of being daddy's little girl. And when I finally got the opportunity to come live with him as a young preteen, that was like my whole world was complete at that moment. And so then to have my father, who again, I pretty much idolized and fantasized about being his little girl, the precious little princess that all little girls want to be, when he, in that drunken moment, literally spat in my face and said he didn't want me, that he wished I had never been born. It was different than like with my mom, who had kind of been in and out, and for other family members who had been in and out. This was my dad, and it just crushed me. It absolutely crushed me. It was like confirmation that I wasn't supposed to be.
Well, those words crushed me when I read your story, because that is such a difficult thing for an adult to hear, much less a child who, as you said, you just wanted to be daddy's little girl.
Yeah.
So take me through the next few years after that happened and how your life hit some major zigzags.
Yeah. Kind of from that point on, I just was a lost cause, sort of. I began just truly seeking love in all the wrong places. I got into the, quote unquote, in crowd, which consisted of a bunch of other broken teenagers. At that point, there was lots of sexual abuse in my home, my biological father being my primary abuser, but also other men that my mother had allowed access to me for different reasons, sometimes a bag of groceries or sometimes for a light bill, just depending on what the need was at that time. And so I was just desperate, seeking unfortunately, male attention, and I became very promiscuous and just started a life of sex and drugs and alcohol. And I will say, and not that it makes it a whole lot better necessarily, but I never really, God truly protected me from some really heavy drugs. But I smoked a lot of marijuana and drank a lot of alcohol. But like I never did, none of the real hard drugs. It was primarily marijuana. But I will say, and I don't know how far you want to go with this, but it was really whenever I got pregnant at such a young age that stopped all of that, because, you got to think just a couple of years into this, spiraling out of control at age 14, I get pregnant. And that was a big zig, or a big zag, whichever way I was going.
And that's exactly where I was heading, because I teach school. Currently, I am tutoring, but I've had many years in the classroom, and I primarily work with middle school students. And so my heart broke for you when I read that at age 14 that you were pregnant. This is another quote. I really was pregnant, 14 years old, 7th grade, getting high daily, loser boyfriend, and expecting a child.
Yeah, that was my reality. And it was terrible. Like, it was terrible, but getting pregnant saved my life, Melanie. And this is not like to promote teen pregnancy, because that is not at all what I stand for. But at that time, truly getting pregnant saved my life, because I knew that, first off, I loved my baby instantly, as I think most moms naturally do. And so getting pregnant with my daughter, I just knew I was going to give her the best life possible. And I was going to protect her, and I was going to love her. I was going to do all of the things opposite of what I had been given. Mm-hmm. And so it was like this gem of an opportunity to be able to, I don't know, just to almost validate my own existence, if that makes any sense. And it wasn't to affirm me, but it was it was to protect my baby and to love her and to make sure she knew every single day of her life she was very much wanted. And though I was young and very naive and very, for some, world standards, immature and uneducated and all of those things, I think that her adult life is proof that, despite all of the many mistakes I made it as a very young teen mother, I was able to show her love and protect her. So.
Well, I'm glad that you unpacked that, because that is a statement when you made earlier about not advocating teen pregnancy, but how that was something that really saved you and helped you.
Yeah.
When I was reading, one of the things that I took away from that was an opportunity for you to show the love that you so desperately wanted.
Absolutely. And it's kind of funny now, because I was 15 for 5 days when I had her. So I was pregnant most of my 14th year and then had her just after I turned 15. So, I have friends that are, further apart in age from me than my own daughter is. And their siblings, and I have friends that have siblings that are younger, closer together or further apart in age than me and my own daughter. And so oftentimes people think that we're sisters, and she's like, no, it's my mom. So I love it though. I'm like, yes, this is my sister. This is my, just teasing. But very proud of who she is. She's an amazing, godly woman who loves the Lord, has an amazing career, graduated top of her class with her, degree, and just she's an amazing human. So great person.
Part of your redemption story.
It is. And obviously she owns, who she is. And none of that would have been possible without God, because truly it's despite me and me being 14 when I was pregnant. It's truly the Lord, and just, how he is so faithful to redeem those that are seeking him. And I say that like I was seeking him. I was not seeking him. He was seeking me. He pursued me my whole life, but I was running from him most of it. But his faithfulness just really is amazing. So, yeah.
And I did see that thread throughout your story as I read your book, because even though you were making poor choices, God was pursuing you, and you could see that. And that is a beautiful part of your story. So not only did you have her at age 15, but tell us about, that's at the time when you were supposed to be in high school and having fun in high school. How did that change?
Well, you can't have a child at 15 and do all of the things and be a mom, and raise your child. If you choose to not raise your child, then you can, do those things, I suppose. But for me, it was so important that I was present as much as possible. I did try to stay in school for, it lasted a couple of weeks, not very long, unfortunately, because babies need food and diapers. And so I had to work, and I ended up having to lie about my age to get a job, because in the state of Texas at that time, you had to be 16 to have a job. And I was not even yet 16, but I had to provide for my daughter. So I had to lie about my age, and I got a job at a local hamburger place. And so she would walk to work with me. Well, she would be in a stroller. She was a baby, and I would walk to work about 5 miles, and she would sit in a little drive-through area while I worked. And every once in a while, my husband would show up to pick her up, and sometimes he wouldn't. And then about 9 o'clock at night, we would walk back home. And that was my life.
So tell me about your relationship with your husband at that time.
Yeah, it was, legally it was a relationship. We did get married. That was my gift from my mom, to sign me over to get married. And I really thought that was the best thing, having a husband and a father for my daughter. And so it was really important for me to get married, even though we were so young. And really what that did is it kind of rescued me out of my home, because getting married, it basically turned me into a legal adult at that point. Mm-hmm. And it got me out of my home. And so because I mean, all the way through this, my home life was just in turmoil, just craziness. And so getting married, I was able to move out, and we were able to kind of, start our own life. My relationship was not healthy though. He was a child also. He was 3 years older than me, but he, partied a lot. He didn't come home most nights. He didn't work. He didn't have a whole lot of desire to be that, provider and protector for our family. Literally, he was just my way out of my home. But I did really feel like I had this kind of picturesque view of what a family was supposed to look like. And there was a mom and a dad and a little girl. And so I really tried to invent this as a reality. But it really wasn't successful for the most part. It was, for the most part, me and my little girl, Ashley. So our marriage didn't last. Obviously you do know that, but we actually only lived together as husband and wife for about 4 months. So that's not great. That's not a success story, but we were legally married for almost 10 years. That's kind of embarrassing to admit, but yeah.
Well, it's a part of your story, and there is redemption in it later on. And we're going to get there because I think that's such a beautiful part of your story. So just to kind of go through a few more things, you became pregnant again, and that is when you made a different type of choice.
Yeah. I was still legally married to my husband, though we had been, not together in any way for a long time, but I was in a relationship. I was actually living with a man who I was very much in love with. And, he was very good to Ashley for the most part. He loved her, treated her like his own. Her biological father was pretty absent from both of our lives and had been pretty much since she was born, other than our wedding day. And so this guy was great. And when I found out that I was pregnant, oh, Melanie, I was so excited. Here I am, I'm playing house really. And I have this guy, and he has a car, and he has a house, and he has a job, and he loves Ashley, and he loves me. And, all the things that I think are so important. And so when I find out I'm pregnant again, this is yay, woohoo, we're going to have a baby. This is going to be great. And unfortunately, when I told him that I was pregnant, he did not have the same opinion. And he just said, I don't want to be a father. And in that moment, when he said he didn't want to be a father, it was so vivid for me. It was like I was just transported right back into that little tiny shacky trailer park where my dad was spitting in my face, telling me he wished I had never been born. And I just could not even imagine my baby, who I already desperately loved, ever feeling for one moment the way I had felt most of my life, all of my life, really, up until this point. And there was no way I was going to bring a child into this world to feel that way. Now, and go along with me here. This was terrible because I loved my baby. I desperately loved my baby. I loved my baby so much that in that desperation, I truly thought that having an abortion was the best thing I could do. That's a lie. It's an awful, awful lie. And that abortion affected me so drastically. It was a horrible, it was a horrible thing. Abortion is so, so ugly. And it ripped my child's life from me. And it was terrible. It was painful. It was terrible. But in that moment, I truly believed that me not giving my child life was protecting my child from a life of being unwanted. And that was it. So I chose abortion.
And that was hard for me to read, although your logic during that time stems from the way that you were treated as a child and the words that you heard, not to make it justifiable in any way, but my heart really ached for you because I saw your predicament and how you didn't feel like you really had a choice. And I read in your book that after that, you went through a major depression and gained a lot of weight as a response, as a coping mechanism to the decision that you made.
Oh man, it was awful. I mean, I cried literally every day for a year. It was complete emotional eating. I was so broken. It was just awful. It was in a sense having to punish myself, for what I had done. Again, I never had any, I knew it was my baby. I didn't have, sometimes women are told that it's just tissue, it's not a baby yet. I had no lies like that. I knew and believed that my baby was a baby from the moment I conceived him. And I was so happy to have him. And so it was truly just mourning that loss. And not just when you lose a child at any stage of life, in womb or out of womb, there's obviously emotional and spiritual consequences to that. But when you are the reason you lost that child, for me specifically, I paid a doctor to take the life of my child. It was just the weight of that was so unbearable. And so I just started partying and drinking and doing anything I could to numb that pain and almost try to just survive with what I had done. It was terrible.
And so fast forwarding through your book a little bit, you did get pregnant again and you had your son, Austin.
Yes.
And then after that, you began working at a gentleman's club, and again, you found yourself pregnant. What happened in that situation?
Yeah, so a lot of life had happened in that situation up until that point, because kind of from that first abortion to working in the sex industry, I had just become a broken person. I mean, I was already a broken person, and then you add on sexual immorality piled on top of sexual immorality, and more ugliness and more alcohol and more brokenness and abortion loss and all of those things. So here I am literally selling my body on a stage for money. And I got pregnant by one of my customers. Now, we were somewhat in a relationship, but I knew I was not going to have this child. We had been careful, I mean, if that's really even a thing. But I did not love this man, and plain and simple, having a child was going to upset my lifestyle. You can't be a pregnant dancer. I just wasn't going to have another child. And I was so completely empty emotionally at that point that there was no thought. It was literally, I called up a friend. I said, hey, I need to go to Dallas. That's where where I live, our current closest abortion clinic is. And she picked me up the next morning. We never said a word about it. This time there were no tears. There was no begging them to talk me out of it. It was just, get this done. I'm not going to have this child.
From that, you found a good zigzag after that, and you met who would be your future husband, Jay.
Yeah.
And I loved reading that part of your story. It kind of twisted and turned like zigs and zags, but you both had some struggles. You both had some baggage, but you worked through your relationship, and you did get pregnant again with Jay and had your daughter, Alexandria. And the most beautiful part of your story is how you were working still at the gentleman's club, and a Christian woman asked you to start working at the restaurant where she worked. And that's where your life really turned around. It was almost like a turning point. I could visually see that happening in your story. So
yeah, that really was. Yeah, it was really amazing. We had a house fire, and so I had kind of worked in and out of the club for that whole season, and my husband hated it. But it was just, it's when you're in that industry, it's so easy to always go back. And so we had a house fire, and, we had no money, no savings. Everything was lost. And so I found myself back at the club despite my husband begging me not to do it. And I got the call from a sweet friend offering me a position at this tea house just not far from us. And it was like culture shock, Melanie. I mean, for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people that just loved Jesus. And I mean, I had kind of been in and out of church a lot, but I didn't have a lot of real healthy experiences with the church. In fact, I had some kind of ugly experiences with the church. And so here I am, and I'm surrounded by these people. I mean, like even the customers, like everyone that came in there nearly just love the Lord. And so it was like these little old ladies, and they would come in and they'd get their little chicken salad sandwich and they would pray. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, and these people that I worked for, they were just so silly and so fun, but they loved the Lord, and they were just always talking about God and Jesus. And they just showed love in a way that I had never, ever experienced it before. They didn't care about my past. They didn't ask about my past. They didn't know anything about it. So of course I had this like fear that if they ever knew, they would not love me. But they didn't care. They just loved me because I was created in the image of a holy God, and they loved him. And so they began to just pour into me. And again, it's one of those things, like, it's so hard to really express, but for the first time in my life, they loved me, and it didn't cost me anything. I had learned so desperately that to get love, you had to give yourself, usually my body. I was usually the price for whatever love I was seeking, and that affirmation. And here these people were, they just loved me because. And it was kind of hard to trust, honestly, at the beginning. And then they ended up inviting me to church, and I thought, oh no, here we go. Like, I'm not going to their church. And so I kind of lie, and I'm like, yeah, I'll be there. And then I didn't. And I thought, oh, now I don't even want to go back to work. And it was kind of like this was a major zig or zag, where it was I either had to go back to the tea house or go back to the club. Because I had to have a job, and I didn't go to church on that Sunday. And I thought, I just cannot go back because they're going to hate me. They're going to be so mean. And I've screwed this up with these amazing people. But at the same time, I just could not go back to the club. And so on Tuesday morning, I just showed back up at work, and these people just loved me. They didn't condemn me or shame me for not coming to church. And they just continued to love me right where I was at. And I don't know, it was a few months later, they ended up inviting me again. And they said, hey, we're going to have this little, festival at our church, and there's going to be a little train ride, and you can bring Alex. Alex was our baby at that time. She was about 2, almost 3. And she said, oh, you can bring Alex. She'll have so much fun. I thought, oh my goodness, I think I'm actually going to go to this. And so I did. And I went that night, and oh my goodness, it was like there was just a ton of these same Jesus-loving, freaky, kind people that were just normal, everyday people you see at the grocery store, but they just happened to love Jesus. And that, again, was just so foreign to me, but they just welcomed me and loved me. And I think I had been so desperate my whole life to feel some kind of love and acceptance. But as you know, unless it's a Jesus love, it's never going to fulfill you. But here it was Jesus love. And they began to just pour into me and pray for me and pray with me. And it was not long at all that I surrendered my life to Christ from that.
And I'm again reading from your book, because when you were baptized, you said the sexual abuse washed, the promiscuity and abortions washed, the dancing at the club washed. I was a brand new person. Just a beautiful testimony.
Yeah.
And you were wanted by Jesus.
Wanted by Jesus. Absolutely. And, for me, and I get, and people have different views on baptism. And for my faith, it's a very symbolic thing of being obedient. for the Lord. But it was for me being buried as Christ was buried. It was like I could physically feel all of those things being washed away. It was a very physical experience for me. And when I was raised up out of that water, I mean, it was like I was truly a brand new person. It was unbelievable.
So I want to fast forward just a bit because we're running out of time, and I want to make sure and cover what we need to cover. But the transformation that happened in your life is just remarkable. It was absolutely beautiful when I was reading it, because as much as you have struggled, as many zigzags as you have faced, God jumped right in there with you and put you to work almost right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he called you to ministry. You went to seminary school, and you became the missions and ministries director, and you had a key role in managing the community benevolence needs, which we didn't cover as part of your story. But way back in the very beginning, your mom and or dad would take you to church, and they would talk to the people and ask for help, whether it was monetary or food or housing or rent or whatever. And you had some bad experiences with that. And then now God redeems that by putting you in that very role. How did that, how did you view that role, and where did God show up as you were ministering to the very types of people that you and your family were back in the day?
Yeah, it's almost comical because it was truly a full circle kind of story and of redemption. Of I was once that little girl, and here I am now, the woman that you come to bring to ask for help. And so many times I saw so many of the same circumstances, and I was able to really just pour into some of these moms and say, you know what you're doing is wrong, and I want to help you and I want to love you, but you don't use your little girl as bait. If we can put some real resources together, you can provide a decent life for your little girl, and you don't have to play this system. So I was able to give back in that way. But I also was able to really help some people that were in real need. And there is a difference. I think that always there's a need, but there is need from people that are just kind of abusing the circumstances and playing the system. And then there's real need where people are trying really hard, but they've been hit with some hard things.
Yes.
And so being able to be trusted with those life circumstances. And I think because of my personal experiences, I was able to see through some of that ugly stuff. And by God's grace, we were able to help a lot of people, but also got to pour into people that were not making really the best decisions. And to kind of get life plans for them. It was a really neat full circle experience for me. I thought I would do that forever, honestly. I loved working for my church.
But God had something different in mind that also is a full circle moment, in that you are now the executive director of CARE, and CARE stands for Christ-Centered Abortion Recovery and Education. So briefly tell me about your role there and how that has given you such connection to God, and how He is using your very story to feed into these women to help them as they recover, or to keep them from making the same decisions that you made.
Yeah, so our ministry is definitely twofold. If we can help prevent a woman from experiencing abortion, then it's win-win, because she's protected from the trauma of abortion, and then the child lives. So it's literally win-win.
Yes.
Unfortunately, so many of our clients have already chosen abortion. Many, they have chosen abortion decades and decades ago, and they've lived this secret life with this burden that they've never told a soul about. Most of the time, they've never told their husband or their best friend, definitely not their church. And so they've lived with this burden of this loss and this wound caused by abortion that they've never addressed. And so CARE comes in and it really is just a Bible study. And I don't say it is just as in like it's just a Bible study, because God's word is all you ever need. But it's not like this big fancy program where you do like weird stuff. It literally is just an intimate small group Bible study, very intense, targeted on healing the wounds left over from abortion. And we have a couple of different ways that we do that with a weekly or a weekend format. But these women come in on Friday and they can barely look you in the eye. They can barely say the word abortion. And then through the process of our program and our Bible study, by Sunday, they leave and they're just free for the first time ever in their lives. And they walk differently. They stand differently. They look differently, because the weight of that shame and guilt and the burden of the wound of abortion trauma is really taken from them. And they're able for the first time, literally in decades, most of the time, to be able to truly just be free in Christ. And so, I mean, how cool is that God so redeemed my 2 abortion stories by every single day of my life now. I get to pour into women and help them find the same hope and healing in Jesus Christ that I found. And it's unbelievable that he allows me this life. Unbelievable.
It's beautiful, to say the least. I love how God will take our very thing that we struggle with, and he redeems it and gives it as an opportunity for us to share with others and point them towards God, but also towards healing. And that's what he's done in your life. And it's such a beautiful thing. So as we wrap up, if we could, will you share your one takeaway for the listeners?
Sure. My one, and this is just this is kind of my life motto, but it's no matter what you have done, no matter what has been done to you, there is hope and healing in Jesus Christ. And I just say that with such personal conviction, because truly there was times in my life where I thought I was so dirty and unlovable and so gross that there was nothing that could save me from that. And then you pile on all of the things that I did to myself. And it was just too much. But then we have this guy named Jesus who lived a perfect, sinless life, who gave his life for mine. And he truly healed all of my brokenness, all of those things that were done to me. And it didn't happen overnight. It was obviously a process, but he healed every single broken piece in my life, of everything that was done to me that I had no control over. And then everything that I did to myself, he has healed every single broken piece. And I'm still a hot mess. I'm still a work in progress. But I am healed and I am redeemed and I am loved and I am wanted.
Yes, you are wanted. And that's why your book, Unwanted No More, is so incredibly powerful. And I want to make sure the listeners go and pick a copy up and get more details about your incredible, powerful story. Such a picture of redemption. And so thank you for being with us today. And I want to make sure that people know that you are also a speaker. So if they would like to get in touch with you about coming to speak at their event, they can reach you at bjgarrett.com. And girlfriend, thank you so much for this time.
Oh, Melanie, thank you. What a great friendship, man. This is awesome. I love it. And I love what you do. And I love your podcast. I love listening to your overcomer stories and all the zigs and zags that we face in life and how good our God is. So thank you for inviting me. And just truly what an honor to be a guest on your show.
We're going to stay in touch, my sweet friend.
Yeah. Thank you so much. God bless you, Melanie.
So remember, when life zigs and zags, and you know it will, there is hope and healing through Jesus Christ. Wow. I so agree with BJ's one takeaway, that Jesus loves you and wants you no matter what you've done or what's been done to you. But honestly, I also took something else away, and that's the importance of loving children, both in actions and words. So, love on those kids in your house, in your neighborhood, at church, and especially the ones who are tough to love, because they may be another BJ who just wants to feel wanted and loved. Don't forget to share this episode with your friends. Join me again February 7th for another episode of the Zigzag in One podcast. Thanks for listening.